March 14, 1945, North Pacific, 180 miles east of Honshu. The surface was empty, the sky metallic, the sea moving in long winter swells. Beneath it, 3 submarines of the U.S. Pacific Fleet cruised in formation without lights or radio. Their orders were classified even within the Navy's own chain of command. This was Operation Blackfin, a mission not to hunt ships, but to make Japan hear ghosts. By the spring of 1945, Japan's seas had already fallen silent. Convoys were gone, fuel nearly exhausted. The U.S. Navy had won the physical war of attrition. Now it wanted to win the invisible one, the war for perception. Allied intelligence believed Japan still maintained a network of underwater microphones and radar beacons guarding its coasts. They weren't sophisticated, but they could still detect an approaching invasion fleet. Before any landings could be attempted on the home islands, those ears had to be confused or destroyed. Blackfin was the answer. 3 WWII-class submarines fitted with experimental acoustic transmitters, codenamed Ghost Arrays. Each array could replay the recorded sound of a surface fleet, engines, propeller wakes, and radio chatter, broadcast underwater to enemy sensors. The idea was simple. Simulate a massive invasion force heading for one coast, draw Japan's remaining destroyers there, and then strike somewhere else. But there was another layer unrecorded in any official log. On the USS Haddock, Lieutenant Commander Aaron Leith carried sealed orders. Once inside Japanese waters, the boats were to map the acoustic grid itself. Using sonar to trace the pattern of underwater cables Japan had strung between its islands, no one knew how extensive that network was. The mission's true purpose was not only deception, but measurement, to chart Japan's hidden lines of detection, its final nervous system. At dawn, Leith surfaced briefly through fog. No aircraft, no radar returns. The Haddock's periscope lens was filmed with frost. He ordered the crew to dive again, set course west-southwest, and reduce speed to 5 knots. Everything depended on sound. Each submarine carried a library of recordings, engines from destroyers, carrier turbines, even the high-frequency buzz of radar sweeps, captured months earlier by Navy sound labs in Hawaii. When played through underwater loudspeakers, the illusions were nearly perfect. Japanese hydrophones, already degraded by years of war, would register them as authentic. The 3 boats moved into their assigned corridors. Haddock in the north, Pollock in the center, Cobia to the south. They were to transmit their Phantom Fleet signals for 48 hours straight. At first, the system seemed flawless. Japan's shore stations began reporting large-scale engine noises approaching from the east. Tokyo's naval staff diverted 4 remaining destroyers to intercept what they believed was an American task force. But by midnight, the submarine's sonar operators noticed something new. Faint rhythmic pings echoing back through the noise. Not from ships, but from below. Someone, or something, was listening to them from the seabed itself. Leith ordered a sound recording. The pings came at perfect 10-second intervals, too regular to be natural. The ocean floor, it seemed, was answering. The deception had worked. But it had also awakened Japan's underwater defenses. March 15, 1945. Approaches to the Key Peninsula, Japan. By dawn, the 3 Blackfin submarines had vanished beneath the thermal layer, running silent at 200 feet. The Ghost Fleet transmissions continued on loop. Diesel engines, propeller churn, and faint Morse chatter bouncing through the deep. To Japanese listening posts along the Key coast, the sounds grew louder each hour. Destroyers scrambled from Kure and Sasebo to intercept an invasion that did not exist. But inside the USS Haddock, the deception was beginning to sound different. At 7 in the morning, the sonar operator reported, "Returns below baseline." The echoes were steady, not random, like a signal bouncing off another sensor. Lieutenant Commander Leith ordered a spectrum recording. The trace showed harmonic intervals, artificial frequencies. Something beneath the seabed was receiving and retransmitting the Ghost Array broadcasts. Japan, it appeared, had built more than passive hydrophones. Months earlier, intelligence intercepts had hinted at a secret coastal defense system called Orochi, a network of underwater microphones linked by cable to island relay stations. It was assumed primitive, but these echoes suggested feedback loops, as if the Japanese system could locate sound sources and return false bearings in reply. Orochi, it seemed, could lie back. At 9:30, Haddock's periscope rose briefly through fog. The sea was empty, yet sonar detected long, low-frequency pulses sweeping east to west. Each pulse was accompanied by faint mechanical clicks. Leith recognized the pattern. Active sonar pings, but slower and deeper than anything American ships used. "Reverse the array," he ordered. "Let's hear what's hearing us." The crew switched the ghost transmitters to listening mode. What they picked up was startling. A dense chorus of underwater signals, thousands of faint points across the spectrum, forming something like a moving net. The Japanese system wasn't a line of microphones. It was a field. At 11 o'clock, Pollock reported the same readings from 80 miles south. Heavy acoustic interference. "Feels alive," the radio man said before cutting transmission. That was the last signal received from Pollock. The Navy would later mark her as missing, presumed lost, but the Haddock sound tapes told a different story. Just after Pollock's final message, a massive low-frequency surge swept through the water column, followed by silence. Leith replayed it 3 times. The sound wasn't an explosion. It was a collapse, like the implosion of a pressure chamber or the failure of a vacuum. By evening, Japanese destroyers had moved into the false contact zone east of Key, chasing phantom fleets. They dropped depth charges at coordinates provided by their sonar network, coordinates generated by Orochi's own feedback. The system was attacking the illusion, and in doing so, revealing itself. Haddock and Kobia now had a new mission: trace the signal to its source. That meant diving deeper, below the continental shelf, into waters few submarines had ever entered. As night fell, the crew heard the faint pulse again, repeating in perfect intervals, always closing. It wasn't chasing them. It was guiding them somewhere. March 16, 1945. Continental shelf, southeast of Kyushu. By midnight, USS Haddock had crossed into forbidden water. The depth gauges read over 400 feet, beyond safe operating limits for extended time. But Leith kept the course steady. The Japanese pulses, slow and patient, continued beneath them like a heartbeat. Somewhere below, the Orochi network was alive and listening. The plan had changed. No longer deception, now detection. The Haddock would map the source, record its position, and if possible, destroy it. Kobia followed 40 miles astern, maintaining radio silence, using coded pings to stay in touch. The sonar operator logged continuous returns from below. The readings were geometric, lines and intersections, as if the ocean floor had been carved by human hands. When the submarine eased to 3 knots, the shapes clarified. A lattice of metal frames, each broadcasting minute vibrations into the sea. The crew stared at the oscilloscope as the image unfolded. Japan's undersea defense was not a myth, it was a machine. It stretched for miles, an underwater grid of microphones and emitters woven through canyons and sediment. It seemed to pulse on its own rhythm, adjusting frequencies in response to external sounds. It wasn't merely detecting American transmissions, it was absorbing them, echoing them back in complex patterns. The deeper Haddock descended, the stronger the signal became. Leith realized what they were seeing was not defense at all, but a communication network. Japan's final wartime experiment in undersea coordination, a system designed to pass encrypted messages through sound waves rather than radio. Silent, unjammable, invisible to aircraft. At 100 feet above the seabed, Haddock stopped engines. The crew released a small acoustic probe, a spherical drone linked by cable. As it dropped, the sonar display brightened with clustered signals. The probe transmitted 5 seconds, then 6, then nothing. Cable severed. "Retrieve it," Leith ordered, but the winch came up empty. The probe was gone. Moments later, every instrument in the control room flickered. The hydrophone screamed, a high-pitched tone rising through the hull until men covered their ears. Then silence. On sonar, a new shape appeared. Circular, rising slowly from the seabed. No screws, no cavitation, just movement. It climbed toward them almost lazily. "Contact, range 800 yards, closing." Leith gave the order to dive. The ballast tanks hissed, the boat angling down, but the contact followed, matching their depth. It emitted a steady pulse every 10 seconds, identical to the Orochi frequency. "Is it a mine?" someone whispered. "Not with that pattern," Leith replied. At 600 feet, pressure alarms began to sound. They had reached the submarine's limit. Any deeper risked implosion. Leith ordered engines full reverse, turning starboard, releasing countermeasures, decoy pingers that imitated propeller sounds. The contact ignored them. Then, without warning, the sonar image dissolved. The echoes scattered like static, and the sea went dead quiet. The crew exhaled, but Leith didn't. The silence was too complete. No background noise, no surface reverberation. It was as if the ocean itself had stopped transmitting sound. Whatever Orochi was, it had learned, and Haddock was now part of its signal. March 17, 1945. Western Pacific, 60 miles southeast of Kyushu. At 3 in the morning, the ocean around USS Haddock became a void. Sonar returned nothing. Even the usual hiss of distant currents had vanished. The crew spoke in whispers, as if their voices might disturb whatever silence had settled outside the hull. Lieutenant Commander Leith ordered a diagnostic. The instruments were fine. The absence was real. Then faintly a rhythmic knocking echoed through the steel. 3 beats, a pause, then 3 more. The pattern repeated. It was not mechanical. It sounded human. Leith looked to the sound operator. "Bearing?" "Everywhere, sir." The men listened as the pattern shifted. 3, 2, 1, pause. 3, 2, 1. Morse code? No. It was too regular, too patient. As they recorded, the knocks grew into long pulses of sound, subsonic frequencies vibrating through the hull. The meters registered amplitude without direction. The entire sea was resonating. At 4:15, Cobia broke radio silence. "Haddock, we're hearing it too. Systematic pulses, grid-wide. Recommend surfacing." Leith hesitated. Surfacing meant exposure to air patrols, but remaining submerged risked losing contact with the surface altogether. He ordered a controlled ascent to periscope depth. At 100 feet, the sonar screen lit up again, but not with ships. The Orochi network had awakened fully. Its returns formed moving arcs converging on their position, not as contacts, but as data patterns, sweeps that seemed to search, calculate, and respond. "Record everything," Leith said. Then came a transmission, faint, coded, distinctly American. A shortwave burst on an encrypted Navy frequency. "Proceed north. Observe. Do not engage." It bore the authentication of the Pacific Submarine Command, yet the timing was impossible. They were too deep for standard radio. Leith's executive officer frowned. Could the signal be playback from earlier traffic? "Or something playing back at us," Leith said. At dawn, they surfaced under fog. The horizon was empty, but the radar picked up brief, flickering returns. Shapes that appeared, split, then merged. Ghost echoes. The same distortion Orochi had used against Japanese ships days earlier was now being mirrored back to them. Leith realized the network was no longer defensive. It was interactive. Every sound, every signal the submarines had broadcast had been analyzed, cataloged, and replicated. The sea itself had become a transmitter. Japan's last automated weapon, built to deceive whoever tried to deceive it. At 6:20, Cobia reported a visual. A surface ripple with no apparent source, moving against the current. Seconds later, her transmission cut to static. Haddock's hydrophones erupted in low-frequency resonance. The readings resembled an approaching seismic wave. The ocean floor beneath them trembled. The contact grew stronger, 500 yards, then 300. Leith ordered evasive course, ballast adjustments, everything to break the pattern. It made no difference. The wave followed their maneuvers as if anticipating them. At 7 sharp, the sonar trace fractured. One bright spike, then nothing. Outside, the sea stilled again. Leith's final log entry before radio blackout was short. Orochi responding autonomously. Recommend termination of transmission. Sea returning signal in kind. Hours later, far to the south, U.S. listening stations recorded a massive acoustic burst across the Pacific Basin. It lasted 8 seconds, then vanished. When surface patrols searched the area days later, they found only fragments: driftwood, oil slicks, and half a torn signal flag. Officially, Haddock and Cobia were declared lost to mines. Unofficially, ComSubPac sealed all Blackfin records indefinitely. June 1945, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The reports arrived without ceremony. 2 submarines overdue. No survivors. Patrol area classified. Cause: probable mine detonation. That single line closed Operation Blackfin in the official record. But in the basement offices of the Pacific Fleet Intelligence Section, the acoustic data retrieved from deep-sea monitors told a more intricate story, one too strange to circulate beyond a handful of analysts. The recordings from the mid-Pacific sensors showed 8 seconds of structured sound, frequencies stepping through precise mathematical intervals, like an engineered signal rather than an explosion. The waveform repeated 3 times, each slightly weaker, as if fading with distance. No known submarine, Japanese or American, could have produced it. Lieutenant Commander Leith's final transmission, "Sea returning signal in kind," became the key line in the inquiry that followed. The Navy's acoustic engineers studied it for months, comparing the last Haddock tape to the spectral profile of natural phenomena. The data didn't match earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or implosions. What they found was modulation. The sound carried information, but its pattern was recursive, fragments of the submarine's own earlier transmissions encoded within it. The sea had echoed their deception, literally sending their own voices back. No further missions of that type were authorized. The idea of a self-reactive sonar field, one that could learn from and answer intrusions, was quietly buried with the rest of Blackfin's files. Decades later, naval historians reviewing declassified records found only the surface logs: weather, position, tonnage of dummy transmitters, and a notation reading "Operation terminated, results satisfactory." But fragments remained elsewhere. In 1952, during seabed mapping off Kyushu, a Japanese survey ship detected abnormal magnetic readings consistent with collapsed steel hulls, surrounded by metallic lattice debris. Divers reported long cables extending into the mud, still emitting faint electrical pulses. When recordings of those signals reached American hands, the analysts found a signature within the noise, a distorted trace of Allied shortwave codes from 1945. Officially, the Navy never commented. By the late Cold War, elements of the Blackfin experiment resurfaced under a new name: the Sound Surveillance System, or SOSUS, a permanent undersea network of hydrophones designed to listen for Soviet submarines. Its architects cited lessons learned from unrecorded Pacific operations. Those who recognized the phrase knew its origin. What had begun as a deception had ended as a revelation. That information itself could become a weapon, but only if one could survive the echo it created. To this day, the coordinates east of Kyushu remain restricted. Oceanographers occasionally record bursts of low-frequency resonance there, brief, patterned pulses that defy natural classification. Some call them geological. Others privately refer to them as returns. In the logbooks of the Silent Service, Operation Blackfin does not exist. Its boats are listed simply as missing. But in the still water over the old acoustic grid, sound sometimes travels differently. Cleaner, stronger, more focused, as if something beneath the seabed is still listening, still imitating. And perhaps, somewhere deep below, the ghosts of the submarines that vanished into Japan's home waters are still transmitting, teaching the sea the shape of war.